forward.
Yep.
All right.
All right, let me introduce
Okay,
you all and
I'll
then
get out of your
we'll
way.
get you going. All right, good morning, everyone. Well, it's a small crowd. Come on, good morning, everyone. That's a little better, all right. Well, welcome to Campus Conversations. My name's Sharon Martin, Vice President for University Relations, and we're thrilled that you're here both in person as well as streaming live this morning. Today's conversation is the second in the series that we began last month. As part of the university's effort to reinvent itself, Dr. Gee has initiated 12 transformation teams that are charged to find at least $45 million in both cost savings and revenue generation over the next 5 years to invest back in the university. So these teams are relying on the suggestions and ideas from everyone on campus to make this effort truly successful, and that is why we're here today. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. The session will start with a presentation, followed by time for questions and sharing of ideas. Follow-up questions can also be asked at the website bureaucracybusters.wvu.edu. Also on that website is information about upcoming programs. We'll have another one in June with the dates announced soon, as well as videos of past conversations that you can watch if you've missed any. And then if you have any ideas you'd like to share on other ways the university can transform itself, you can submit those at the website as well. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Dan Durbin, Senior Associate Vice President for Finance, and Dave Beaver, Assistant Vice President for Procurement, Contracting, and Payment Services. Transformation Team number 4 is charged with finding ways the university can transform how goods and services are procured with more focus on strategic procurement. They will be sharing ideas on how we can simplify and standardize business functions, how we can reduce the cost of procuring goods and services, and how we can curtail spending while improving services and quality. Information on Mountaineer Marketplace, WVU's new e-commerce tool, also will be discussed. This new tool will allow users to shop online and compare prices between some of the university's most frequently used suppliers. So please help me welcome Dan Durbin and Dave Beaver.
Thank you. Can everyone hear? Good, good. Hey, as I walked in from the parking lot a few moments ago, something struck me that the clouds have parted, the sun is out, the rain has stopped. We've had a wonderful transformation in our weather over the last 24 hours. And I was able, in my mind, I drew a correlation between that and the subject matter of today's discussion. And that's the transformation of how we conduct business at WVU at various levels for various things. But before we talk about the transformation, let's spend a few minutes talking about why we have to transform. Okay? First, we are experiencing some financial pressures from a couple of sources. Number one is our state support has been decreasing over the last 3 years. Our state support has dropped by about $30 million over the last 3 years. We have had about $30 million worth of budget reductions over the last 3 years. We've basically gone from about $160 million of state appropriation down to about $130 million. So that $30 million is a pretty significant piece of the base that we started with a few years ago. The second component is enrollment. Enrollment is very, very challenging in today's time. Other institutions, colleges, and universities have really ramped up their enrollment strategies and their recruiting methods, and basically their scholarshiping strategies and things of that nature. So we need to be very, very competitive in today's environment to be able to attract the best and brightest students to WVU. And frankly, that costs a little more than it used to in the past. So the other thing we need to do is the economic cycle that the state is experiencing right now, the economic downturn, is just like a lot of other economic cycles, and that is it bottoms out and then it comes back up. We need to be prepared for when it comes back up. And we need to be prepared to take advantage of the enrollments that are out there, the students that are out there, the opportunities for research and economic development and entrepreneurial activities and entrepreneurial opportunities that are out there that could present themselves. So it's not just looking at what's happening today, but it's planning for what's going to happen tomorrow, next year, 3 years from now. So we bundle all that together in our planning process. And as part of that planning process, we've identified a target of about $45 million that we basically need to carve out or save from the university's expenditure base over the next few years, about $45 million. Sounds like a big number, but Actually, if we all work together and we do this in a very coordinated manner and through the teamwork that we've solved problems with in the past, there's no doubt in my mind we can reach our goal. And speaking of reaching the goal, we have developed several strategies to be able to do that. And one of those strategies is the transformation teams that Sharon mentioned a few moments ago. There are 12 teams. I am honored to be to serve in the lead capacity of transformation team number 4. And transformation team number 4's goal is to as Sharon mentioned, to basically change the way we acquire goods and services and the way we conduct business. The membership, I think it's important to note who the members of the committee are, because frankly there's some pretty heavy-hitting members of the committee, people who control several pockets of vast resources in terms of people and technology in the university that can be brought to bear to help us transform these business processes and systems. For example, John Campbell from an information technology standpoint, Chris DeBorg from an HR standpoint. We also have some members of the business office community as members of the team. Lisa Sharp, who's in the audience, if you could raise your hand and introduce yourself, Lisa. Lisa Sharp and also Tammy Sira. Those are representatives from 2 fairly large business operations on campus. David Beaver, who is, procurement is one of the centerpieces of our strategy, and it's important to have David as part of the team. And last but certainly not least, as we design these processes, design these systems, we want to make sure that they're not only effective and efficient, but they're also in compliance with the laws, the regulations, and the regulatory environment that we have to function in. So it's important to have Stephanie Taylor, our general counsel, as part of the group. We want to do these right, we want to do them efficiently, and we want to do them properly. So what does Team 4 do? What is Team 4 doing? Basically, we're trying to design more efficient and less costly ways of conducting business across campus. And if you want to think of it in terms of a process, one of the goals is to try to standardize and simplify as much as possible a process and wrap technology around that to be able to execute those processes as quickly as possible with as least amount of waste and paper and human intervention as possible. And to do that, it's actually a pretty simple approach. We're asking 3 questions. What are we doing? What business function are we doing? Who's doing it? And how are we doing it? Pretty simple. And our destination, if you think about the destination of what we're trying to do as we ask the who, the how, and the what, we're trying to land at an intersection. We're trying to land at the intersection where processes, cutting-edge technology, trained and highly motivated staff, and a high level of customer service all intersect. We want to hit right in the middle of that intersection. That's our goal, that's our destination as we relook at the business processes and design new ones, or refine the ones that we have. Now, Team 4 has been busy over the last several months, and we wanted to share some of the outcomes and some of the projects that Transformation Team 4 has worked on and is continuing to work on. The first one involves some student support functions. It's a medium-sized one. The next is related to the business office function and structure. It's fairly large. And the last is a really large. It's extra large, if you want to think of it that way. So we've got medium, large, and extra large that we wanted to share with you. We don't do anything small at WVU. The student services is something that we've worked on over the last several months. And if you think back 1 year ago, we had 3 core student service areas on campus: the registrar's office, financial aid, and student accounts. A student would register for classes, they would arrange their aid, and they would be billed and pay their bill. We had 3 separate offices, 3 separate operations in 3 separate locations. So what happened were students were in effect being bounced around between offices. No one's fault, it's just the campus was laid out that way. We'd done business that way for decades, it just evolved. So a student had to go to one office to accomplish something. Based on the outcome of that office, they had to go to another office, and then after that, they had to go to another office. That did not enhance the student experience. I mean, it's kind of like if you're in the DMV and you go to the window A and they tell you, we can't really help you halfway through the transaction, you need to go to window D. That's just not conducive to a positive student experience. So we undertook a task and a process to merge those three offices. Again, financial aid, registrar, and student accounts, merge those from three functions into one function to make sure that we could take care of a student need in one location with one interaction. And frankly, we've been successful. It's called the Hub, the Student Hub. It's located in the Evansdale Crossing building. And that, we feel that has really paid dividends in terms of reducing the bureaucracy that students have to go through just to be able to register for classes or pay their bill or arrange their aid. So that is one very tangible outcome of this process. And frankly, it's one that we all should be proud of. Second area that we're looking at right now is business offices. We have over 20 business offices across this campus. Each one of those business offices is in a separate location. They have different capabilities. They have different processes. The way you do something in one business office may not be the way you do it in another business office. We also have different service levels, and we have different depths and capacities in terms of the staff's ability to do certain things. And finally, each business office seems to have, to a degree, their own set of rules. So we've got varying rules across campus. And we're in the process of looking at, again, how can we standardize, how can we simplify, wrap technology around that, and execute transactions faster and more efficiently. The pilot program, if you will, of something that we're testing the waters with with regard to the business offices is it's a shared service concept. The private sector has done it for decades. It's becoming almost mainstay in higher ed these days. But we're trying to look at where do we gain some economy of scale when it comes to business offices and business functions? And we basically started looking in our own backyard from an administrative standpoint. We have business offices in the provost's office, in finance and administration, and also one in the research office that we have identified. All the vice presidents of those three areas have agreed to basically let their business offices be merged into one larger shared services function. We have a fourth that will be coming in soon. We didn't want to announce it because we're still working through the process. But the goal is to take those 4 business offices, merge them into one function, much like we did with the student function I spoke about a few moments ago. Build some standardization, simplification, wrap technology around it, and be able to do things a little faster and add depth and some capabilities to that function to enhance the customer service experience. The business office, the shared service function the administrative shared service function on the screen here is probably going to be operational in probably July, mid to late July. Okay, so this is a testing of the waters, a proof of concept we want to try with administrative business offices, and I do not expect one mega business office to serve everyone on the campus, but if this works, we want to go out and we want to look at, again, who's executing transactions, how they're doing it, and where they're doing it, so we can start to see if there's some economy of scale across campus that can be had to bring into this concept and again, gain efficiency and cost savings. Last but certainly not least, the extra large item, okay? And that is buying stuff, okay? We buy stuff in this university each and every day, and when you aggregate that spend, it's about $400 million, almost $500 million worth of stuff that we buy. Everything from paper clips to consulting services, you name it, we buy it. And at this point, it's a fairly uncoordinated spend. Office A may buy office supplies from vendor X. Office B may buy the same office supplies from a different vendor. They could pay different prices and have different terms and conditions and things like that. So it's a bit of an uncoordinated spend. We are procurement card dependent. We have grown up with a procurement card over the last 20 years. That procurement card can foster if you will, some inefficiencies, and it certainly generates paperwork. We have to keep paper with the P card. It's labor intensive. The purchasing process that we have is labor intensive. We have roughly 500 people across this campus who are involved in buying things or paying for things in one way, shape, or form. 500 people. That's a lot. It's a lot of people touching transactions. The good news is we have a tool we implemented a few years ago, WVU Buy. The bad news is we've outgrown that tool. That tool is just all clunky to you know, at best. It was P card dependent. So we need a better tool. We need a better process. We need a better strategy. With that in mind, we looked to our newly transformed procurement department under the leadership of David Beaver to help us work through this. And David is going to spend the next few minutes talking with you about what they've observed and how David is going to address and transform the buying and payment process.
Thank you. First, for the person that texted me and said I look like Chris Christie behind Donald Trump, thank you very much. I'll have to work on my expression when I'm sitting behind Dan. So to Dan's point, you know, $400 million is a lot of money, and we think that it's very feasible that we could save $40 million, 10% of that, by just doing things smarter. And I'm going to talk about that. And the other thing that's interesting on his 500 people involved in the process, as we've got out and talked to people, most of the people involved in this process, that's not their day job. So my team, we're procurement folks, that's our day job. We go out and we negotiate, we put contracts in place, we deal with vendors. A lot of these are teachers and faculty doing research. They actually have a day job. So hopefully, as we transform to this new system, it takes the burden off a lot of people that have been forced into dealing with vendors, vendor complaints, and those are things that really need to shift into our central organization. So procurement is, you know, so how do we go after this stuff? So just like Dan likes to simplify things, saying, hey, it's about buying stuff, you know, with procurement, there's really three big steps. And whenever we look at things, it's finding savings, getting savings, and keeping savings. If you remember one thing today, it's find, get, and keep, right? So how do we do that to be effective? So the first thing is, how do we find these savings opportunities? So about a year ago, we implemented a spend analytics tool. And the reason that was important is because we know we spend $400 million, but you need to know more than just how much we spend. It's who we're spending it and what we're spending it on. If you look at some, maybe things are coded to repairs and maintenance. You don't normally go out and source repairs and maintenance, because in that bucket of money, could be security services, could be elevator maintenance, it could be janitorial supplies, janitorial services. So having this spend analytics tool in place allows us to really understand what we're spending our money on and with who. And it helps identify high potential categories. So for us in procurement, whenever you see high spend and high vendor fragmentation, there's always opportunities to save. And that's just kind of a truism in procurement. You see that fragmentation and spend, you know there's opportunities. And it allows us to put together these opportunity assessments. So we sat down and came up with a strategy, which categories we want to tackle first. So the initial list of categories we identified represent, we think, about $13 million in savings against a spend base of $85 million. We haven't even touched the entire $400 million yet, but we'll do it in phases. Wave one will be the first 85. Once we finish those, we'll go to the next one and to the next one. So our first pass at this is about $13 million in savings. So now that we've found where this is, how do we get it? So what did we do? So we launched Wave 1 categories, and when we launch these categories, these are usually cross-functional teams, so we'll work with different EBOs and different folks that are involved in this process, and we'll either do an RFP or we'll look at maybe renegotiating a contract. Everyone's a little different. The nice thing about RFPs, and I think here at WVU, RFPs got a bad name at one time because all of a sudden you needed to buy something, and we had to go out to bid, and you're on a short timeline. What we're doing now with this spend analytics is we're ahead of it. We're not being pressured to do the RFP. It's on our timeline. So we're doing RFPs for things that don't expire for 6 months, let's say. So we have time to really do a proper vetting of who's out there in the vendor community, negotiate great deals. So it's on our timeline. So in some cases with RFPs, other cases we may just choose to renegotiate with that existing vendor. A good example is with pouring rights. So just recently finished renegotiating with Coke. So we had an opportunity in our contract with Coke. We were halfway through it, so we had a clause in there that said we can go out and test the market. So we tested the market, but then that allowed us to renegotiate our deal with Coke. So the categories included in this wave one include pouring rights, office supplies, lab supplies, IT software and hardware, executive searches, furniture, food, dental supplies, travel, and expense processing. So there's a few others, but these are the main categories. So I'll talk about two that we recently completed. So the first one was office supplies. So we went out to bid for office supplies. We were doing business with about 6 or 7 different vendors. We're buying paper from some, toner from others, supplies from others. Had a cross-functional team. We had representation from Arts and Sciences, Health Science Center, a lot of the big EBOs. Went out and tried to see what we can do in the marketplace. So as a result of that, we're going to be announcing here shortly that Staples will be our new preferred vendor. With that new vendor relationship, we're going to save about $500,000 per year on the stuff that we buy. Pretty big savings in that category. The other one that we recently completed was for food. So this is one where we partnered with Dining Services. So we had tremendous support from David Friend, Kathy Curtin, Dan Esposito, because this is their bread and butter, right? They buy food to that ultimately feeds our students. So we looked at how they're spending their money, who they're spending it with. It's about an $8 to $9 million spend, and it was fragmented with a couple of large companies. We worked with Dining Services, did an RFP, and as a result, they're shifting a big chunk of their business, about 80%, to U.S. foods. The result of that will be about $1 million savings per year in the food category. So if you look at just those two categories we looked at, it was about $1.5 million in savings per year on about a $12 million spend profile. So that's about 12.5% savings per year. So the question is, what can we do with the $400 million? So when we stand up here and say, we think there's $40 million in savings on that $400 million in spend, that's very doable. Some categories, we're going to get higher than 12.5% savings. Others, we're going to get lower. But collectively, a 10% savings target is very doable because a lot of these categories have not been looked at, and we haven't really pulled everyone together. As Dan mentioned, we're very kind of fragmented, and we go out to vendors. Some teams go out independent. If we all work together, this whole concept of one WVU, we can do tremendous things because we have amazing buying power. $400 million is a lot of buying power. And what I've seen since I've been here is we're not really getting the benefit of that spend in the marketplace with respect to pricing. So that's what we're trying to fix. So we found the savings, we're getting the savings, but the third one that's so important is keeping. So the worst thing you could do, and the most frustrating thing, is you get a good deal in place, but people don't use it, and savings evaporate. So we've spent a lot of time on this concept of keeping savings, and that's really what we're going to talk about for the next 5 or 6 slides. So keeping the savings is really about driving spend to our preferred vendors. We have to do this. So if we all agree that we're going to use Staples as an example, we need to use Staples. We can't go off and buy from different vendors because ultimately Staples is going to come back and say, well, I'm not going to honor those pricing. We're not getting the volume we thought. So we really have to work and drive spend to our preferred vendors. We're not always going to have one vendor per commodity. If you look at lab supplies, we're going to have multiple because it's such a big, wide, diverse group. But when we have those 3 to 5 preferred vendors, let's say for lab supplies, we really need to make sure that we drive business to those vendors. And how do we do that? So we use technology to do that. So the enabling technology today is very good. So we have a way to ensure that we keep the savings by driving spend to these preferred vendors, and that's Mountaineer Marketplace. It's a e-procurement system that allows us to drive behavior, and it drives people into one system, and then from that one system, it takes them to our preferred vendors and who we want them to buy from. So the shopping experience also needs to be simple, intuitive, and paperless. So we'll talk about that. So we can put a system in place, but if it's clunky and it's hard to use, people are going to get frustrated and they're not going to use it. So we've been working on Mountaineer Marketplace for about last 8 to 9 months. We're getting ready to go live this summer. It's a very nice, intuitive system. It's easy to use. It has to be because it has to mirror what people are used to doing in their personal shopping life, or they'll just get frustrated and go back to the P card. I will say next up, we're not going to talk a lot about it today, but one of the big categories is travel and expense. So once we automate the procurement process with Mountaineer Marketplace, shortly thereafter, we'll be rolling out a new travel and expense tool. We're working on that right now. we spend about $25 million per year in travel. It's such a paper-intensive process, not just the booking of travel, but the expense process. So what this tool will do, will automate that process as well. So when you go log on, it pulls in all your credit card charges. If you need to add a receipt, you take a picture, it uploads. So we're going to really modernize that whole expense process next. So keeping the savings. So I'll talk a little bit about Mountaineer Marketplace and kind of why it's different from WVU Buy, because that's important to note. So Mountaineer Marketplace will be our new e-procurement tool. This thing fully integrates into MAP. And why that's important is because it gets data from our ERP system, which is MAP, so it knows who you are, it knows who your supervisor is, it knows where your location is, and it knows if the account codes you use are current, it knows if account codes for a grant, it knows who the PI is to add them for notification. If you use an account code and it's attached to an Arts and Sciences EBO, it routes to the EBO for approval, so it's a very intelligent system. So it's fully integrated and it works very well. It uses approval workflow. You can approve via your email, you can approve on a mobile device, so if someone's in a meeting and they're busy, they can go in and in a few seconds approve an order. We had to make it easy that way. Like I said, it routes automatically to your supervisor, EBO, PI, et cetera. It uses pre-negotiated contracts, so when you go into the system, you'll see catalogs, the Staples catalog, our lab supplies, our audiovisual catalogs. Plus, you can still buy from, we have 18,000 vendors in the system because we pulled over any of our existing vendors so you could access them. So it's not just catalogs, it's also non-catalog orders. So that's going to be the system to go in to do all of your buying. It also submits orders to vendors and lets vendors submit electronic invoices back. So this really supports our drive to become a paperless environment. So it's streamlined, it's automated, it's all the things that we would want in a procurement system. And that was the slide I just talked about. So sorry about that. And then, so why should we use it? So the why we should use it, first, we made it easy, right? So it's like we want it to be an easy experience like your personal shopping. The other thing that's important to note is, if you look at the two bullets on the left, you can track your orders to see where they are, and EBOs get real-time information. It's all about transparency. So this system will let you know if you place an order, where it is in the process, who has it. No more wondering, is it with procurement? Is it with my EBO? It'll tell you who has it, when they had it, when they received it, how long they've had it, complete transparency. So I think people will enjoy that aspect of the system. I mentioned earlier, it frees up time. We want this to be, grab your items and go get on with your day job. And it's going to save us a lot of money. Just having a system like this drives about $5 million in compliance, because that's what's lost when we don't buy off of our preferred contracts. It's going to cut the paper use. So all of our internal forms that we use to pay vendors are in this system as well. If you do internal transfers, lease payments, utility payments are all automated in this new system. And then the final thing on there, it gives you accurate upfront funding. So it'll ask you for an account code, a funding string, if you will. If the string's not valid, it won't let you proceed. So all that back-end reconciliation we do today to move things around, to find the proper account structure goes away, because the system won't let you buy something unless the account string or the grant is active and current. So what can you buy through Mountaineer Marketplace? So it's pretty much everything. So like I said, we'll have catalog items from our commonly used vendors, lab, office supplies, break supplies, audiovisual, all of your non-catalog orders. All vendor invoices we process using e-forms. So I had mentioned earlier, confirming orders, essential services, lease payments are all in the system, cash transfers. So it's really everything will be going through the system, with the exception of travel-related expenses. That will still be done today when you travel. And then P-card, we're not taking P-cards away. We're just trying to limit the use of P-cards, so you'll still have P-cards. But those will be kind of restricted to emergency and small one-time purchases. And we're working with the EBOs. We're not going to be ready day one with every catalog they need, so there's going to be some transition time. But really, you'll start to see a much lower reliance on P-card purchases. This is an interesting slide. So we talk about paper. So we went and looked at how much paper is in our current process, right? So we looked at 20,000 direct pay invoices, 16,000 invoices to pay purchase orders, 750,000 pieces of paper tied to P-card. So here's P-card, you think it's a paperless transaction. That generates by far the most paper. It's all that back-end reconciliation stuff. So about 1 million pieces of paper per year, which is 10,000 pounds of paper. We're gonna save 12.5 trees. Now I'm from California, so we get the rap of being tree huggers, so we like to save trees. Here in West Virginia, I've never seen so many trees before in my life, so I don't know if we're gonna be winning people over by saving trees, but we will save money by buying a lot less paper. So it's something that'll be good for the university, good for the community, and we'll be buying a lot less paper. This is a lot, I mean, this is 10,000 pounds of paper we can take out of our internal processes. So that's all I have on Mountaineer Marketplace. I think we're gonna open up to any questions. And what Sharon mentioned earlier, a lot of these things are on the Bureaucracy Busters website. If there's other questions you have, you can submit questions, but we'll open up for questions now.
We'll take any questions as long as there's not math involved. Thank you.
You did such a good job, they don't have any questions.
That's right. Any questions at all? Okay, there's one there.
We've had the opportunity to work with Dave in the Mountaineer Marketplace. So one of the interesting things that we found during that process was the printer program. And I think that if you want to give an example of those other kinds of opportunities we have, it's not just buying, particular buying power. We were really made privy to other information through that process.
So I didn't hear the first part, but you were talking about what the system will allow us to do, or?
Printer program that we found through the RFP
Oh,
process.
yeah, so that's, so we, when we went out we had Tina and Lisa on the RFP team for office supplies. We found out things like, for toner, of that $500,000 to savings, most of the savings in paper and toner, we weren't getting the right pricing for the toner we were buying. So HP, if we want to buy OEM or original manufacturer toner, we were more than qualified for HP's big deal pricing, which is 35% lower than what we were paying, and we were paying rack rate basically for toner. So it's things like that, these processes really uncover some big misses on our part. So the process really highlights, where we're getting, what kind of pricing we're getting, what kind of deals we have in place, and what we're missing out on. So, yeah.
Any other questions or ideas?
Thanks. Do you have a mechanism in place for how you're going to track these individual saving opportunities that are going to be found across campus so that we can see ultimately what the prizes are?
So let me see if I can answer that, because for us to identify the savings, we're constantly looking at that $400 million in spend. So we already have our wave 2 categories kind of thinking through. We want to touch all 400 million and look for opportunities. But there's other things on the Bureaucracy Busters homepage. There's a section for people to submit ideas where they see inefficiencies, because a lot of the stuff comes from, we've had these meetings, these great meetings with the different EBOs and these focus groups, and we're finding out a lot of stuff that we didn't know that was going on that we can kind of go to really identify additional savings. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, let me be more specific. For
Sure.
example, so if the Eberly EBO finds a way to save X dollars on their HP printing supplies, are they tracking that? Is there kind of a roll-up of what's actually being saved? You have the projected, hoped for savings, but are we able to track somehow these various different savings across campus through these individual buyers that are benefiting from the preferred vendor offers?
That's a great question. So savings tracking is part of what we do in our department too. So, and with that spend analytics tool I mentioned, we can now see trends of buying. So we refresh that data on a quarterly basis. So we can start seeing not only who used, say, the Staples contract, who didn't use the Staples contract, what they were paying before, what they're paying now. We can see trends of their savings, or you can see trends of their savings going up and their spend going down. And then we can go back to the EBOs and say, okay, of that $500,000, Arts and Sciences saved $75,000 through that. So yeah, without a doubt, we can track the savings now. Each vendor is a little bit different how you track stuff, because it gets a little complicated, because sometimes you're saving money, but your demand's gone up and you're buying more of it. So that's when you have to kind of peel it back a little more to really get to that true savings number. But yeah, we are tracking it at the EBO and department level.
And on the website, we are showing different ways that we are saving money. Maybe what we'll do is look at how we can track the actual dollar amounts and put that up there too, so people can watch and see how that rises. That's a good idea, Julie. Any other thoughts or questions for these guys before they are set free to go save more money? I think you're off the hook pretty easy then.
Nice,
Thank
that
you
was
very
easy.
much. Help me
Thanks,
thank
guys.
Dave and Dan for presenting with us today. And then just a reminder, we'll do this again in June. We're having Randy Hudak from his team they're going to talk about some energy savings and things that we can do throughout the university to save some money there. So they'll be here in June. Those dates will be announced really soon, as well as the location. So thanks for coming today. We appreciate it.